In the vast landscape of entrepreneurial mythology, where venture capital headlines often drown out the quieter but more disciplined paths to greatness, the stories of founders who bootstrap their way to billion-dollar empires stand apart as testaments to resilience, frugality, creative constraint, and a level of strategic clarity that only emerges when every dollar spent is a dollar earned. And to understand how companies like MailChimp, Spanx, GoPro, Shutterstock, Calendly, Atlassian, GitHub, and Lynda.com rose from kitchen tables, garages, and lone founder experiments into global forces without external funding, we must look beyond the cliches of hustle and into the deeper architecture of how bootstrapped founders think, operate, and adapt under pressure. Bootstrapping begins not with money, but with constraint, a condition that forces founders to prioritize ruthlessly and build products that deliver real value to real customers immediately. There is no luxury for speculative moonshots, no runway for unfocused growth, and no tolerance for vanity metrics, only survival metrics. When Ben Chestnut and Dan Kurzius built MailChimp, they had spent years running a tiny web design consultancy where cash flow dictated every decision, teaching them the discipline of listening to customers long before customer obsession became a Silicon Valley buzzword. The email marketing tool they created was born not from a fundraising deck, but from solving actual client problems, a pattern echoed by countless bootstrapped icons. Similarly, Sarah Blakely launched Spanx with $5,000 in lifetime savings, no fashion background, no professional network, and not a single investor willing to take her seriously. Her constraints forced her into the relentless focus of testing prototypes on herself, learning manufacturing from scratch, and hand-selling product to Neiman Marcus, embodying the bootstrapper's mentality of turning rejected doors into windows of opportunity. This mindset is evident across industries. GoPro's Nick Woodman sold bead and shell belts out of a Volkswagen van to fund his early camera prototypes. Calendly's Tope Awotona drained his life savings to build the scheduling platform that now powers millions of global meetings. And Shutterstock's John Oringer started with 30,000 stock photos he took himself because he couldn't afford contributors, proving that resource scarcity can become the catalyst for innovation rather than a barrier. From constraint emerges the second core pillar of bootstrapped empires: early revenue as validation, a principle all but inverted in venture-funded startups, where growth precedes monetization. Bootstrapped founders cannot afford theoretical business models. Their products must prove themselves in the marketplace instantly. GitHub charged users for private repositories from day one, establishing a culture where value creation and revenue generation were intertwined rather than sequential. Atlassian, now a multi-billion-dollar software powerhouse, famously refused to hire a single salesperson for years, relying instead on transparent pricing, self-serve onboarding, and product-led growth that converted users into paying customers without persuasion. Linda Weinman built Lynda.com as an online education pioneer, long before e-learning became fashionable, funding growth through actual student subscriptions rather than investor capital. And her discipline eventually led to a $1.5 billion acquisition by LinkedIn. This focus on revenue forces a clarity that fundraising often obscures. Bootstrapped founders build what customers want, not what investors hope will scale. Parallel to this revenue-centric focus is the art of iterative, cost-efficient building, a habit forged from necessity. Products evolve slowly, deliberately, and with relentless user feedback rather than the blind velocity that often consumes venture-backed startups. Bootstrapped founders turn limitations into leverage. Without millions to burn on engineering teams, they optimize for simplicity, elegance, and function. MailChimp's iconic features came from incremental refinement rather than massive rebuilds. Basecamp, formerly 3.7 Signals, deliberately limited its product scope, favoring minimalism and stability over feature bloat. And Notion, though later funded, survived its early near-death by adopting a bootstrapper's obsession with resource management. In these companies, every line of code matters, every workflow is carefully considered, and every feature must justify its existence through customer value rather than executive ambition. Bootstrapping also shapes a unique leadership philosophy anchored in cultural authenticity. Because founders who answer only to customers, not boards, not investors, not quarterly milestones, build companies in their own image, often with deeply humanistic, mission-driven cultures. Ben Chestnut famously described MailChimp as a scrappy underdog brand for scrappy underdog businesses, an identity that resonated globally because it was genuine. Atlassian designed its values, open company, no bullshit, around transparency and humility long before corporate culture became commodified. Spanx cultivated empowerment and humor as core cultural pillars, reflecting Sarah Blakely's entirely self-made journey. Community, not capital, becomes the bootstrapper's moat. Another defining force behind Bootstrap's success is hyper-pragmatic marketing, where creativity beats budget every time. Without money for ad campaigns, Bootstrap startups rely on virality, word of mouth, product-led growth, or clever guerrilla tactics. MailChimp's quirky brand voice became a magnet for small business owners. GoPro capitalized on user-generated content long before UGC became mainstream. Calendly spread through the humble friction of shared scheduling, links each invitation, acting as living advertising. And Basecamp gained traction through thought leadership and contrarian essays rather than traditional marketing. Bootstrap marketing is not just cost-effective, it's structurally self-propagating. Yet the most underestimated pillar of Bootstrap to billion journeys is psychological endurance. Venture-funded founders navigate pressure. Bootstrapped founders navigate survival. They endure years of near misses, loneliness, skepticism, slow growth, and the psychological burden of having no safety net. Founders like Blakely, Weinman, Awotona, and Woodman built empires not from uninterrupted success, but from the refusal to quit when quitting seemed logical. Bootstrapping builds resilience not as a virtue, but as a necessity. When these elements constraint, early revenue, iterative rigor, cultural authenticity, scrappy marketing, and resilience combine, bootstrapped companies eventually reach a tipping point where discipline transforms into dominance. Their decisions, once constrained by necessity, become strategic advantages. They own their equity, control their destiny, avoid dilution, and retain the freedom to scale profitably rather than frantically. Bootstrapped billionaires do not owe their empires to pitch decks, investor whims, or market timing. They owe them to an operational philosophy built on precision, patience, and purpose. And as we explore how these forces interlock to create runaway momentum, we begin to see that the road from nothing to billions is not paved with capital, but with discipline, clarity, and a relentless commitment to building value brick by brick. And as we step deeper into the architecture of these self-funded empires, we begin to see how these qualities evolve from survival instincts into strategic superpowers that allow bootstrapped companies not only to thrive, but to outperform many venture-backed rivals in both durability and profitability. For within the bootstrapper's journey lies a profound transformation. What starts as constraint becomes culture. What begins as necessity becomes methodology. And what initially feels like limitation becomes the very foundation that shields the company from fragility as it scales into the billions. This transformation becomes clearest when examining how bootstrapped founders build at the pace of cash flow reality, not hype cycle fantasy. Without investor capital distorting incentives, these companies scale only when the economics make sense. Revenue must exceed expenses, customers must value the product enough to pay for it, and growth must be sustainable rather than manufactured. This discipline creates innate robustness. Atlassian reached multi-billion-dollar valuations long before going public because its self-serve model produced dependable, compounding revenue. MailChimp generated hundreds of millions in annual profit before ever considering acquisition. Spanx remained entirely founder-controlled until Blakely chose partners on her own terms. By avoiding premature scaling, a common trap for venture-backed startups, these companies preserved optionality, agility, and independence. Equally powerful is the bootstrapper's mastery of asymmetric decision-making, the ability to pursue actions with massive upside and minimal downside. With limited resources, every choice must be weighted by its return on time, capital, and energy. This discipline leads to strategies like product-led growth, Calendly, organic content engines, lynda.com, user-generated marketing, GoPro, and radical simplicity. Basecamp. Bootstrappers naturally gravitate toward compounding mechanisms, automations, templates, integrations, educational content, community flywheels, because these assets scale without scaling headcount. The result is a business model designed for leverage rather than burn. Yet the most defining characteristic of bootstrapped billion-dollar companies is their control over identity and mission, a freedom rarely afforded to venture-funded founders who must align with board agendas and investor timelines. Self-funded founders build companies that reflect their values. Spanx embodies empowerment and humor. MailChimp celebrated creativity and small business quirkiness. Atlassian baked transparency into its DNA. Basecamp championed calm, sustainable work. This alignment between founder psychology and organizational culture creates magnetic brands with loyal customers who sense the authenticity behind the product. As these companies scale, the absence of venture pressure enables a kind of patience-driven innovation that compounds quietly over years. GitHub refined its developer-centric approach with obsessive focus until Microsoft acquired it for $7.5 billion. Lynda.com produced high-quality educational content for nearly 2 decades before the world caught up and recognized the value of online learning. Calendly expanded from a seemingly simple scheduling tool into an indispensable infrastructure product used by global enterprises. GoPro evolved from a DIY wrist strap into an ecosystem that defined an entire category. These founders did not chase trends, they built enduring tools whose value grew as the world matured. But the road from zero to billions is not paved only with craftsmanship. It also requires extreme psychological resilience, perhaps the most underrated advantage bootstrappers possess. Without investors to cushion failures or validate progress, the journey demands relentless self-belief. Blakely endured years of rejection before Spanx took off. Oranger spent months shooting stock photos in isolation before Shutterstock gained traction. Awatona risked everything financially and emotionally to bring Calendly to life. These stories reveal a shared truth. Bootstrappers succeed not because the path is smooth, but because they endure when logic says, quit. Eventually, when product-market fit deepens, these companies reach an inflection point where discipline turns into dominance. Their advantages: profitability, loyal customers, strong culture, focused product, and controlled growth compound, until they become acquisition targets, category leaders, or global platforms with billions in enterprise value. The irony is striking. By avoiding outside funding to preserve autonomy, they inadvertently build businesses so valuable that investors eventually chase them. But by then, the founders hold the leverage. They choose if, when, and how to scale further. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. Bootstrapped billionaires prove that success does not require permission, pedigree, or pools of capital. Only clarity of purpose, craftsmanship, empathy for customers, and the endurance to move steadily forward while others sprint and collapse. Their stories remind us that autonomy is wealth, discipline is fuel, and value, not velocity, is the ultimate multiplier. The path from nothing to billions is not a shortcut. It is an architecture of choices, built slowly, intelligently, and with unwavering conviction that the most powerful empires are those strong enough to stand on their own foundations